everybody. I'm Delegate Ken Plum. Welcome to our show, Virginia Report. You know, most of the time on the show, we talk about something going on in the executive branch of government, or certainly we spend a lot of time talking about the General Assembly, the legislative branch of government. But tonight we're going to focus on the judiciary, and we don't talk nearly enough about that. But I think we have an interesting conversation for you tonight. My guest is Justin Fairfax. Justin, welcome.
Thank you very much, Delegate.
You are a local attorney with the Venable firm.
I am, yes.
What kind of law do you practice?
So I do litigation at Venable, white-collar criminal, and also commercial litigation.
Good. Now, you have most recently been involved in a study that I think is quite an eye-opener for we want to share with people.
Absolutely.
And that's about looking at our judiciary, meaning essentially our judges,
right,
and how they reflect our community, or I should say, don't reflect our community.
Correct.
Tell us a little background about how you got involved in that and what your findings were.
Yes, I'm happy to. And first of all, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for your leadership on this and so many other issues. As you mentioned, I'm part of an organization called the Virginia Coalition for Racial Diversity in the Justice System, and we formed that coalition several months back. In part to focus in on the judiciary, but also to focus in on increasing racial diversity throughout the justice system here in Virginia. So that's to include prosecutors, who we call Commonwealth's attorneys here in Virginia, as you know, and public defenders' offices as well. We did start with our focus on the judiciary because what we noticed was that there was a significant lack of diversity, particularly throughout Northern Virginia, which, as you know and you represent, Northern Virginia is a very diverse place. So globally in Northern Virginia, nearly 40% of the general population is of a diverse population racially, and yet only about 10% of the judiciary here is diverse. So roughly of about 74 judges throughout Northern Virginia, only about 7 are held by people from racial and ethnic minorities. So we felt that disparity was stunning and was worth taking a look at and highlighting.
And it is the case that when you look at the folks who come before the court, there is a diversity in our system, but those folks come before a judge who largely 9 times out of 10 is going to be a white person.
Right. And I think that that's a significant issue from the standpoint of sort of people's trust in the system, and we want people to trust in the system. I'm an attorney, an officer of the court. I'm a former federal prosecutor, as you know, here in the Eastern District of Virginia. So I'm somebody who trusts in the system, who wants it to work and believes that we can achieve just outcomes, but we need to make sure that everyone has that same sense of trust, in particular the general population, whether we are talking about the criminal context, where you have defendants, as you mentioned, from very racially diverse backgrounds. They want to see a court system, a judge, staff, law clerks, law enforcement who reflect the community, and I believe that will enhance the level of trust that they have in the system, will decrease the sense that they may have that bias exists in the system, and I think that's better for all of us as citizens here in Virginia.
Now, maybe we should, for our viewers' understanding, take a step back and talk about how does a judge get on the bench?
Absolutely.
And judges, of course, are old lawyers.
Yes,
not necessarily old lawyers, but they've been lawyers because they understand the law, obviously.
That's right.
But beyond that, then, how does one get to be a judge?
Yes, and this is something you know incredibly well, of course, as a great delegate, having been involved in the system for a long time. For the viewers, Virginia is one of only a couple of states where the legislature actually selects judges. So our General Assembly, our delegates and senators are the ones who actually select and install the judges. There is a process, and in fact, I should say processes, because each jurisdiction has a slightly different process whereby candidates who apply will be reviewed by local bar associations. Oftentimes it'll be, so for instance in Fairfax, where I'm from, the Fairfax Bar Association, but also diverse bars. So you'll have the Black Bar, the Hispanic Bar, the Asian American Bar, the Women's Bar, and others who will sort of also weigh in on the qualifications, the credentials, and the background of the candidates. Once they have gone through that screening process, the candidates are rated. They're given ratings by the various bars. They are then passed along to the legislators, who then review the nominations, and then the legislators actually select the people who they would like to have be selected to the judiciary at that point.
And historically, that's been a very political process.
Yes.
Now, I will say that in my tenure as a Northern Virginia delegate, we have worked hard to try to get the politics out of the selection.
Yes, that's important.
And I believe, and you tell me if you see it differently, that as the process goes around Virginia, we probably come as close in Northern Virginia to trying to get a an open and fair system.
Right. I think that's exactly right, and I think it's been a commendable effort by yourself and other legislators to again make sure that we are, to the extent we can, kind of taking the politics out of the process, really focusing in on the nominees themselves as lawyers, as people, and judging them on that basis. And the thing that we think we would want to do, at least in this effort, is to sort of enhance that process, right? Exactly. Which is already a very good process, by including sort of a broader pool of people who are considered, sort of highlighting other aspects of their candidacies and of the needs of the judiciary, and thereby, making a more robust judiciary and a better one, I think.
Exactly. Now, again, as history goes, and we want to kind of explore this fully.
Yeah.
In the Northern Virginia case, we have had some great examples of putting the first blacks on the court,
yes,
the women on the court, and so on.
Yep.
But when I review your statistics, I realize we only just kind of made a start. We never got any got very far.
Right. We made a start. Right.
Because we had, for example, Marcus Williams on the General District Court.
In Fairfax, that's exactly right. Yes, 1987.
Yeah, Gerald Lee
has
gone on to bigger things.
Yes.
As a circuit court judge, he went on to be on the appellate court.
Absolutely, and he's on the federal district court now. And I clerked for him on the federal district court. He's an extraordinary jurist.
Extraordinary. And then in the juvenile domestic relations court, we had Judge Carr for a number of years.
That's correct.
But that's about it.
That's it.
Yeah, and
that's right.
We're talking about a larger pool.
That's right.
Now, downstate, again, it seems that so many times it's who knows whom.
Right.
And it's a law partner,
right,
a friend,
that's right,
an associate or whatever,
that's right,
gets those positions.
That's right.
And there doesn't seem to be any public airing, if you will,
right,
any interview process, a selection process, is kind of closed around that delegate. When that delegate and that senator happen to be in the majority party.
That's right.
Yeah, because if you're in the minority party, you don't get
doesn't work that way.
Doesn't work that way. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And,
yeah.
and certainly we think more transparency, more publication about the positions when they become open is always better. We want fair and open processes. And you mentioned it in the statistics in Fairfax and the examples. In the case of Fairfax, again, there's no African American that currently sits on the circuit court or the general district court. Right. You mentioned Judge Gail Carr in the juvenile domestic relations court. She was appointed in 1994. Right. So it's 22 years ago. It's been 24 years in the circuit court and 29 years in the general district court. Wow. So it's just really stunning. And so we want to, like you said, we've made a start, but we don't want to go 20 and 30 years before we can appoint, racially diverse judges. And as for the processes downstate, you mentioned, those should be revamped and I think should be more reflective of what's being done in Northern Virginia. And you mentioned the dynamic about sort of a law partner or a friend of a friend. I mean, that's often how not only judicial selection works, but life works. And that's often the result. The result of that oftentimes is the lack of opportunity. Sometimes not even intentional, but we're just not looking more broadly for talent and for really highly qualified people. And so we want to break through and find a way to make sure that we are considering a broader pool of talent.
Well, I want to commend your group for the study because it's an eye-opener for me.
Yeah, it is.
And I think it's an eye-opener for other legislators as well.
Absolutely.
And the issue becomes one of when we crack open the door, then what do we do to, in fact, make sure that in the future we do a better job of open selection? Absolutely.
And so we have some recommendations, again, focusing in on the transparency, which you mentioned it's very important, broadening the pool, giving increased sort of weight to the sort of criterion in the selection process of diverse bars, because they often have a different take than maybe the majority bar may have on a candidate, and more familiarity with that candidate. And one thing that we like to analogize to, you may be familiar with this, the Rooney Rule in professional football. And I'll give you the very quick 2-second primer on this. The Rooney Rule came about, the owners of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I actually was born in Pittsburgh, though I live in Virginia. But they saw an issue where a lot of the head coaching positions were sort of going around to the exact same people every time, often sort of to white male candidates who had held the positions before, without really giving much opportunity for others to be considered. And so what they instituted with the other owners is the Rooney Rule, which says that you don't have to select a minority candidate, but you have to interview at least one. whenever you have a vacancy in a head coaching position. It's not a guarantee of an opportunity, but it's a guarantee you at least get considered. And what happened as a result is you had this significant increase in the number of minority coaches who were selected. One really great example with a tie to the Commonwealth of Virginia is actually the Pittsburgh Steelers, who hired Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin went to William & Mary, played football at William & Mary. He was selected as a result of this Rooney Rule. When he went in for the interviews, he wasn't the top candidate. Some people were familiar with him, but not all. But when they gave him the shot to interview, he blew them away. And they said, this is the person we've been looking for. And had they not had that rule in place, had they not given him that opportunity, they may never have found him. He may never have found them. And he went on to win 2 more Super Bowls for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we'd love to do something like that in this context as well.
Sure. Well, you also mentioned at the top of the show, and again, it's important for us to recognize that the judge is at the top of the judiciary, but there's a whole lot of other positions in there that we need to look at as well.
That's exactly right. And so as you mentioned, the title of the organization is for diversity in the justice system more broadly, and not just the judiciary. Because again, we believe that all aspects of the system need to be representative of the community. As I mentioned, I'm a former federal prosecutor, and so I've also been a defense attorney and a prosecutor. And I think it's important, for instance, for criminal defendants to come into court and to see people who are reflective of the community, again, so that they understand and appreciate the fact that it's not about bias, it's not about being against a particular person or community or not being familiar with that community, but it is about impartial justice and equal justice under law. And I think the more diverse we are in our staffing, the more people will have trust in the system in that way.
And it needs to be intentional, not by chance, happenstance, and so on.
That's right.
We need to recognize that needs to be a part of our system of choosing people.
That's exactly right. It's got to be a feature of our process. And again, we certainly are not arguing, and I don't think anyone really has, for a guarantee of a certain number of selections. But however, when you do guarantee those opportunities, a natural outgrowth of that is increased diversity. And as you mentioned, we made strides on this probably 25 to 30 years ago. We really started to break through, and there's been this huge gap. And we've literally had a generation or two of minority attorneys, again, sort of across the spectrum, really be excluded from these opportunities, which has limited, many of them in their careers. They still have gone on to do great things, but we again believe the judiciary should be open to everyone. And we've selected some really great people as well. So that's one of the challenges. Steve Shannon, who's a very wonderful man, close friend, was recently selected. I was at his investiture in October. He's an excellent jurist. It was an excellent pick for the Fairfax Circuit Court. We just believe that we can also diversify and add others.
And still have excellent picks.
That's exactly
right. We're not
right.
talking about changing the standards.
That's exactly right.
To open the door to other people to have
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Well, in terms of the selection process, unfortunately, people saw a part of the politics of the selection process with the filling of a Supreme Court justice or the attempt to not fill the Supreme Court justice position. Because, first of all, it's a legislative prerogative, presumably, to name judges.
That's right.
But it also, when the legislature is not in session, and of course 10 months out of the year we're not in session.
That's right.
You get a vacancy.
That's right.
And the governor has the opportunity.
That's
and
right.
the governor selected what most people, I think, consider a preeminent
absolutely
judge.
Judge Roush. Absolutely.
Judge Roush.
Yes.
To be on the Supreme Court of Virginia. And the legislature then, some of the leadership, as the phrase goes, got their nose out of shape.
Yeah, that's right.
And they decided they weren't going to approve her nomination.
That's right.
And I think unfortunate results to a stellar career for her.
That's right. That's right.
And then they went on to name a white conservative male.
Right. At the end of the day.
At the end of the day, that's what was the outcome.
That's right.
So that shows, again, how the politics get into it.
That's right, and that was an incredibly unfortunate situation for Judge Roush, who, as you mentioned, is a preeminent jurist. I don't know that there was anyone who could have, challenged her credentials or her career. She had a stellar career, and hopefully will continue to go on to do great things. And so I hated to see her in that situation and the way she was treated. Also Judge Alston as well, who's a very good man, very good man, a very good jurist on the Virginia Court of Appeals. He was also put up at a point, and again, preeminently qualified and a wonderful jurist and a great man, and so he also found himself in a really difficult position, and they ended up going with someone else. So to your point earlier, we really need to get the politics out of the selection of judges throughout the entire process, and make it something again that's more transparent, that's fair, that's focused on an independent judiciary. Even though they are selected through the legislature, it's important that they have their independence, because we want them making judgments not based on politics.
Yeah.
And here in Virginia, they don't run for election.
Right.
They're really qualified judges, who come out of the ranks of being qualified lawyers, and we want that to be the case going forward.
Dustin, I need to tell you that when I first went to the legislature in 1978,
yes,
I introduced a bill for the merit selection of judges.
And I'm not surprised by that at all.
Well, I was all but thrown out of the room with the idea that somehow the legislature would give up its prerogative to just simply make that selection.
Yes, yes.
But what I was concerned about at the time, and the Northern Virginia change helped to take away my concern a little bit in terms of how we did in Northern Virginia, was the fact that there was no systematic review of the credentials and the background and experiences of these other people, because I vote on judges statewide.
Right, exactly.
And I have nothing given to me other than the word of the local legislator that happened to be who they wanted. Right,
that's right. And again, as I mentioned, it's no surprise that you would have spearheaded something like this even back in 1978. I mean, you really have had great vision on so many things, have been incredibly progressive, and I think that's a wonderful step in the right direction, because again, we want, not just in Northern Virginia, but as you mentioned statewide, for us to select highly qualified judges, very diverse set of judges that reflect their communities, and also to have a process that people believe is consistent and transparent, and that you don't get a different kind of justice because you live a few counties away or you're in a different legislative district. As we always say, the Supreme Court etched above it is equal justice under law. It's not justice according to where you live.
Right.
And so we want to make sure that everyone gets access to the exact same type of justice, including in the selection process itself.
Justin, you mentioned that I think we're one of 19 states that use the legislative selection process.
I think even fewer. I think we're one of only a handful, maybe two or three. Yeah.
Well, what do you see among other states? Do you see a model of which way we should turn?
I think merit selection is certainly an excellent way to go. And among the 50 states and territories, you have, of course, a patchwork. And so in some states, you actually have election of judges where they run, which I'm not in favor of.
I'm not in favor of that.
Right. I just think, you're making promises, and we talk about taking politics.
Money.
That's right. That's right. It just sort of creates all kind of appearances of conflicts of interest if they don't exist already. And so I think, again, merit selection is the one that we see in other states that's a positive step. The federal system is also a very, I think, positive one. It's one where the executive nominates, so in this case the president nominates certain individuals. There's advice and consent among the Senate in the federal system, and then they are ultimately approved. But there is a system of checks and balances there. I think there is, a transparency in that process, a public airing. And so I think something along those lines is what we'd be looking for, and certainly not on the word of one, just one legislator, without some sort of systematic review and without some consideration for the broader diversity that we need in the system.
Now, when I had talked about merit selection, I was really talking about some kind of an independent evaluation of candidates.
Right.
And certainly in the human resource area, in the business industry, we figured out how to establish the credentials of people.
Right.
That if we could do that, then the legislature could take that information and do with it as it will.
Right.
It wouldn't change the constitutional requirement that the legislature approve them.
Right.
It would simply give us good information.
That's right. That's right. Which I think is a wonderful thing. Again, first of all, the more information, the better. In terms of the selection process and sort of candidates review and background, and again, that creates some uniformity in the system. If we sort of had everyone go through a similar process and provide the same types of information, and then it allows our legislators to actually, like you said, be comparing apples to apples, be kind of reviewing, the full background of the candidates, and I think that that's a really positive thing.
Now, Justin, the other side of this is, too, that not only is the judiciary not reflective of the racial and ethnic diversity of our community, it doesn't reflect the gender of our community either, by any means.
Right, and that really is an issue in a lot of places, and I think it's another area of specific focus. The reason we sort of focus specifically on the racial aspect is because the disparity was so great in a lot of these jurisdictions. So, for instance, in Fairfax, the numbers were just so striking, and although there is more of a gender balance in a place like Fairfax, the racial and ethnic balance was just decidedly off. But your point is exactly still correct in that in many jurisdictions we need to have more women judges for many of the same reasons that we need to have more judges of various racial and ethnic backgrounds, and it strengthens the judiciary, the system of justice. One of my sort of heroes and champions, actually a fellow Columbia Law School graduate, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, has been a champion on this issue for many years. She was class of '59 at Columbia. I was class of 2005, so we didn't go at the same time, but she's really extraordinary. And she has talked at length and very compellingly about the notion that the more diversity we have, gender, racial, and ethnic, the stronger the judiciary is. And she's seen this in her own career as a lawyer and as a judge, and it brings more to the process and makes us better and stronger.
Yeah, and that would come about through a MERT process. Now, for example, I was around when Justice Roush was named to the Circuit Court.
Yes.
And we selected her because of the strength she brought in terms of commercial litigation.
Yes.
It wasn't because she was a sweet mama. It was because she was an accomplished attorney.
Absolutely.
In the areas in which our circuit court had a deficiency, as the business climate of Northern Virginia expanded, we needed a judiciary that was reflective of that, and she brought that talent.
It's phenomenal. Yes, that's exactly right. So like you said, there are many sort of flavors of this diversity that all of which strengthen our system. So it's a great thing to have a really strong commercial litigator in that position who can, frankly, handle we have a lot of business disputes, as you know, in Fairfax County.
Complex.
Right, complex. And so someone with that background enhances our system of justice. It's good for business to have someone who understands making those decisions, and again, good for the broader public as well. And another aspect that I've heard is having judges who speak multiple languages. Who are bilingual, who can kind of understand things. And we have interpreters in courts, but the benefits of having a judge who can hear a witness's testimony and understand the inflection if they're testifying in another language and that sort of thing. Again, another aspect of diversity that strengthens our system.
And that has a major impact in the Northern Virginia courts.
Yes.
The need for interpreters is intense.
Significant,
and we've had to look at modifying the scale at which we assign judges because the court takes longer. You have to have an interpreter there.
That's exactly right.
And to the degree that we could have more judges that were more language proficient in other languages, that would be helpful too.
That's exactly right.
Where do you see your group going with? You brought good information to our attention.
Yes.
Where do we go with that good information to try to bring about change?
Well, thank you very much for that. And as I mentioned, we started several months back. We did a call to action back in January of this year, which got a lot of people involved and interested. We then did a lobby day at the General Assembly at the end of February, which was wonderful. Got to talk one-on-one with some great legislators who, some of whom weren't aware of the disparity in the numbers and said, look, this is an issue and it's a problem and we've got to do something about it. So we raised that awareness. We actually had some early success in a judge that you voted on, Petula Metzler, in Prince William County. To be the first African-American female ever to sit on the Prince William County General District Court. Prince William County, as we know, is actually now a majority-minority jurisdiction. One of the few in Northern Virginia, and so 54% of the county is minority, and they now have their first African American female General District Court judge. So that's a great early success. This has been covered in the media. So we've had some great editorials written up in the Loudoun Times-Mirror. The Washington Post is taking notice of this. So we want to continue to, again, raise the awareness to make sure that we measure the success. So the 7 out of 74 judges is where we are today, but we want that to increase steadily over the coming months and years. And each time there's a new process, a new opening, we want that to be publicized and to make sure that it's a broad pool of applicants who are considered. So we're certainly not going away. Don't feel like, the first, kind of couple months in a successful rollout is the end of it. We want to continue this because, again, it's something that's good for all of Virginia. I mean, as you know and you've championed, diversity is one of our great strengths here in Virginia. Diversity of our economy, diversity of our population, and we think that also applies to diversity in our justice system.
Now, we need also to recognize that the bar associations play a role in our selections.
Absolutely.
Sometimes when we have, and in Northern Virginia, we have an abundance of really well qualified people.
Yes, we do.
Sometimes we turn to the bar for recommendations. Do you expect that the bar will also become more active in this opening process of recruiting more people?
Yes, we're very hopeful in that regard, and we've approached the bar sort of with this information and hoping to work collaboratively with the bars of the various jurisdictions. You're right, they play a really significant role. And one issue that got raised as we reviewed this was sometimes, I mean, they always are helpful, but sometimes they operate as a rubber stamp. In terms of whatever they suggested, the legislators would sort of just take their recommendation as as the final word on who's qualified and who's not, and that would lead to some issues again with the lack of diversity. Again, one great example, we mentioned Judge Lee, who again is a stellar jurist, regarded really as a legal giant here in Virginia, and I clerked for him in the federal district court. He did not receive a qualified rating by the Fairfax bar 2 out of the 3 times that he applied, including the 3rd time he applied, and yet he still was granted an interview by the legislature and was selected. Again, because they saw his qualifications, and he blew them away, and he's gone on again to be, have the president nominate him and the Senate confirm him to be a federal district court judge. So just because someone does not get a particular rating by, the majority bar does not mean that they're not qualified and doesn't mean that they shouldn't be considered. So we want to make sure that the bar also values diversity in its process, but also that they're not sort of the final word and that others are considered.
Help me with the name of the woman, Barbara Keenan, who went on to be from a circuit court to be on the Supreme Court of Virginia, who didn't, as I recall, have a qualified recommendation from the bar when she first came to us.
Yeah, and I think Jonah Fitzpatrick also.
Oh, Jonah Fitzpatrick.
Jonah Fitzpatrick, yeah, and you're right, and she became the chief judge of the Virginia Court of Appeals, so the 2nd highest court in our Commonwealth. Right, and didn't have the recommendation of the bar.
Exactly, and so we do go beyond those recommendations, but it would be helpful coming in if we had an assurance that they were working by the same set of rules of openness that we were as well.
That's exactly right. And then considering, again, that diverse array of other bars and kind of on equal par with the bar. So in this case, we're talking about Fairfax, but the African American bar, the Asian American bar, the Hispanic bar, the women's bar, you're looking at them all together and not letting one sort of have veto power over any other.
Now, we have just a few minutes remaining, but we need to say a word again about prosecutors who in Virginia are elected. Commonwealth's attorneys are elected.
That's right.
And we don't see the diversity in those ranks.
That's exactly right. And this is another really critical part of our system where we really do need diversity because, as you mentioned, particularly criminal defendants often are incredibly diverse. We do see, more and more, for instance, younger African-American males or Hispanic males who come before the courts in the criminal context. And obviously it's something we want to do something about and to sort of stop that flow. But, until that we sort of make headway on that, we also want to have, a set of prosecutors who, not only are perceived to be fair, and I know that we have some great prosecutors. Again, I'm a former federal prosecutor, and I worked with some stellar people, some of the best lawyers I could ever hope for, and our office was relatively diverse. But we want to have diversity among their ranks as well, both because, again, it feeds the appearance that the system is fair, but also there's that oftentimes sort of cultural relevance that people have and those experiences that they may share with certain people that actually may make justice better and may make the system work better.
And in the case of, say, a Prince William County where you have a white prosecutor, that person has been elected many times over, to have him as a goal that his staff, which is a large staff of people, reflect the community then.
That's exactly right. And unfortunately, those numbers today and for a long time have not reflected the growing diversity in Prince William County. A quick word on Loudoun County. We mentioned the judiciary earlier. They have 12 judges have never appointed a racial or ethnic minority to the court, ever. And so, same issues with the Commonwealth Attorney's offices and that sort of thing. So we've got to really focus in on this.
Justin, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much. You've brought to our attention a most critically important issue, and I look forward to working with you on resolving it.
Thank you very much, Delegate. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you for joining us on Virginia Report. Join us next time. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.